The United States has used virtually all of its long-range precision missiles during the war with Iran, according to sources. Specifically, the U.S. has used nearly all of its Army tactical missile systems, known as ATAMS, and precision strike missiles. The U.S. military has also used up nearly 80% of its key missile interceptors, as commanders warn stockpiles are dangerously low. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates the United States had around 2,200 Patriots of the platform's two most modernized variants and 452 THAAD missiles in its stockpile before the Iran war. Citing sources familiar with a recent inventory assessment, CNN said senior U.S. military commanders are warning that the Pentagon's munitions stockpile is dangerously low. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth dismissed the report Tuesday night on X, saying, "Not true. Shame on you," in referring to a screenshot of the CNN television news banner repeating the claim. CSIS analysts estimated that the U.S. has between 759 and 827 Patriot interceptors left, roughly a third of its pre-war inventory. The U.S. also has an estimated 234 to 278 THAAD interceptors remaining, down from 452 before the war, according to the July 27th report. American and partner forces have relied heavily on the Patriot and THAAD systems to defend troops and bases against Iranian ballistic missile attacks across the Middle East. The ground-based systems have reportedly intercepted the vast majority of Iranian projectiles, but CSIS experts have warned that it could take 2 to 3 years or longer to restore pre-war levels. Munitions were not designed to be built like Ford trucks and are essentially handmade. From contract award to delivery, it can take 24 months to create a Patriot missile. Despite the diminished stockpile, CSIS analysts said the U.S. has enough missile interceptors on hand for any plausible scenario in the war against Iran, with the risk coming from any potential future wars, particularly with China. On Monday, the Defense Department announced agreements with Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin aimed at tripling and quadrupling the production of Patriot and THAAD missiles, respectively. In the meantime, another ceasefire with Iran could be on the horizon, with reports Wednesday that the U.S., Iran, and Oman are closing in on an interim agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, Axios reported, citing two regional sources and a U.S. official. The deal being considered would establish a 60-day temporary arrangement between Oman and Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, and no tolls would be charged, among other conditions. On Saturday, Trump said he had canceled plans for military strikes against Iran in expectation of reaching a deal to reopen the strait, and in response to requests from Iran and other countries in the region. Based on this request, I have agreed, for the future benefit of the world and likewise the survival of a successful and prosperous Iran, to cancel the attack, subject to being able to rapidly make a deal, he said on his Truth Social platform. U.S. strikes on Iran are paused again so that diplomacy efforts can continue over the Strait of Hormuz, according to President Trump. But the president is still threatening to resume large-scale attacks on Iran if U.S. terms are not met. Axios reported on August 4th that the United States, Iran, and Oman are nearing a deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, with Washington aiming for an agreement possibly to be announced on August 5th, according to two regional sources and an American official. U.S. officials and Iranian negotiators continue to present competing interpretations of the emerging arrangement on the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians' inconsistent messaging in these negotiations is likely a product of the competing Iranian regime factions' approaches to control over the strait and negotiations with the United States writ large. U.S. officials, including U.S. President Donald Trump and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, continue to insist that the strait must remain open to international shipping and not be subject to Iranian control. Western reporting on August 3rd and 4, citing regional mediators, suggests that U.S. and Qatari mediators have floated a compromise to return traffic through the strait to pre-war levels, under which inbound traffic would transit through Iranian waters, while outbound traffic would pass through Omani waters. U.S. and regional officials made it clear in these talks that this system would not involve tolls. Western media also reported on August 4th, citing regional mediators and a senior Iranian source, that Iranian diplomats sought to retain maritime monitoring and intervention rights while demanding service fees, blockade relief, and sanctions relief. The Iranian Foreign Affairs Ministry is concurrently framing talks over this arrangement as an issue to be managed between Iran and Oman rather than part of broader U.S.-Iran negotiations. Iran's broader military establishment, which appears to currently dominate regime decision-making, maintains its position against significant concessions over the Strait of Hormuz because they assess that Iran can outlast the United States in the war. The Supreme Leader's military advisor, Major General Mohsen Reza, told regime media on August 3rd that Iran should not abandon its control over the strait, while claiming that Iran's drone and missile attacks on U.S. regional bases have compelled U.S. commanders, forces, and equipment further out of the region. This faction controls Iran's current military operations, including the IRGC Navy's continued coercive actions to disrupt shipping through the strait, aimed at reinforcing Iranian claims over the strait and threatening the shipping companies, both of which impose costs on the United States. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations reported on August 4th that the IRGC Navy harassed a vessel on August 2nd before an unknown projectile fell in the vessel's vicinity. The United States has continued to enforce its naval blockade against Iranian ports and vessels that it reimposed on July 14th. U.S. Central Command confirmed on August 4th that U.S. forces have redirected 45 commercial vessels, disabled 2 vessels, and boarded 2 vessels to ensure compliance with its blockade on Iranian ports. UKMTO reported that an unknown projectile struck the engine room of a cargo ship that was transiting northbound of the Strait of Hormuz in Omani territorial waters on August 3rd, causing fire and a power outage on the vessel. Iranian media reported on August 4th that an unknown projectile hit a Greek-owned cargo ship, Minoan Pioneer, off the Omani coast near the strait's entrance. Iranian missiles and drones launched since July 7th, at least 411, with 3 between August 3rd and August 5th. Brent crude oil price, $78.77 a barrel as of 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time, with a day range of $78.11, $80.95. The current standoff between the United States and Iran is no longer a clash of capabilities, but rather a struggle of political endurance and bargaining leverage. The United States began the conflict with broad goals that included stopping Iran's nuclear program, weakening Iran's missile and conventional military capabilities, and regime change. It is now a contest involving maritime coercion, domestic political constraints, and even great power competition. Tehran's toolkit of drones, naval mines, and swarming small boats imposes risk and uncertainty, even if it is no match for the U.S. Navy. The U.S. blockade is inflicting severe economic pain on a country that, even before the war, faced a disastrous economic situation. Washington retains the capacity to clear mines, escort shipping, and suppress Iranian naval assets using Marines and Special Operations Forces. The conflict demonstrated Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. Prior to the war, this capability was often discussed but never tested. Now it constitutes Iran's best lever to pressure the United States in negotiations. For the Iranian regime, the conflict is existential, while for most Americans, it is best over and forgotten, with the hope that prices at the pump will fall. The war has tilted the balance of power toward more hardline elements within the Iranian political system. The likely outcome is neither decisive victory nor clear defeat, but rather a negotiated settlement shaped as much by perceptions of resilience and resolve as by the balance of forces on the ground. If the United States does not develop the capability and the credibility to manage this threat, what is now a short-term, if painful, disruption will harden into a durable feature of the global energy system, raising the long-term costs of both the war and the peace that follows.